All right, so there's a bunch of things I want to talk about in regards to the Boston and Florida series here today. First things first, I want to cover I've taken a lot of heat seemingly defending play against Sam Bennett, and I'm not defending Marchand. Just to be clear, I am a diehard Boston fan, but I am not defending all the dirty things that Marchand has done over the year. It seems that people, and again, this is from a bunch of private accounts of people who most of the profile photos are just like an object or something. Nobody wants to actually publicly say anything that like what they are saying in the comments of all my videos. But the main thing I want to say is Marchand has done dirty things in the past. He has totally deserved disciplinary action that he's received. And all I'm asking for here is for Sam Bennett to receive some disciplinary action towards what he is doing on the ice. Thankfully, in Game 5, he was almost invisible on the ice other than 2 missed shots on net. So it's not like he's a huge threat to Boston at this point in time, but the guy can score. The guy can play really good hockey. So him missing a game for Florida, it's a big deal. And if he's going to do dirty plays and constantly get away with them, this is just something to note as a hockey fan, as a Bruins fan. If somebody does something illegal and dirty, they should pay for it. There are a bunch of things I want to talk about in this video today. If you're watching this video to this point, you probably have a pretty open mind, right? You're probably more of a mature hockey fan, and that's something that I've worked my way up to. I used to be a Bruins or die fan. Like anything that would happen on the ice, as long as it benefited the Bruins, I did not care. But now, as you start to mature as a fan and you start to get older and you see a lot of hockey, you just want the game clean, right? You want them to play hard and play tough, but you don't want dirty stuff to happen. The thing I'm noticing though with this series is Boston can win this series, right? I do think this series is going to go to 7, and from that point, it's a complete toss-up what to expect in the 7th game of a series like this. But the only way Boston can win, really, exactly what they did in Game 5. They have to replicate that to a T. There's 2 things they did really well. One of them is pretty much easy, and they don't even have to worry about it, and the other is not so much. Number 1 is the Swayman. Swayman is unbelievable. He's arguably the best goalie in the playoffs right now. When you look at his numbers, you might get a different depiction of his actual performance. When you watch him, he is just so stable. He's so clear-minded in all his interviews. It's very impressive to see how far he's come in such a short period of time. So that part of it, to me, it's covered. Swayman is going to be really, really good. Some goals, of course, can get past him, especially with a high-scoring Florida team. The other thing I want to talk about, the only way the Bruins are going to beat Florida is if they continue to exit their zone properly. They exited their zone so well in Game 5, and if they can do that in Game 6 and do that in Game 7, that's the only way you're going to beat this team. Florida is the better team. Between Boston and Florida, if you look at it on paper, if you look at it in overall performance, as close as they were in the regular season, Boston beat them 4 times in the regular season. We all know that doesn't mean a whole lot coming into the playoffs. Florida is the better team. And you know they want the Stanley Cup. They had a little taste of it, but were super beat up last year. And you know they can get there again, and they know that. So in order to beat them, only way they're going to beat them is if they get exits. Boston has to get the puck out. Otherwise, there's no chance this series goes even past 6 games. Now, quickly, what I want to touch on as well is just the lack of officiating in this series. We see bad officiating every single playoffs. I was listening to an interview, Mike Milbury, a former Bruins legend, talk about the officiating this year, and he was basically just stating, like, this is the worst officiating he's seen in the last 2 to 3 decades. Like, it has been that bad. And people just kind of resort to saying, yeah, the officiating's bad, get used to it, suck it up. But I think you're doing the sport a disservice if you say that, because it's just so bad this year, right? And I think we should be being hard publicly on what we are seeing, because that's the only way the product can actually improve going forward. Now, there's 3 really big calls that they've totally screwed up on in this series. The Sam Bennett punch was one. Tough angle, I get it. The Sam Bennett push to Coyle and scoring to tie the game in Game 4, just very clear that it was goalie interference, and they disagreed. And then again, in Game 5, more controversy. Danton Heinen enters the blue paint, ends up tapping skates with Bobrovsky. That was goalie interference. And we all believe that it was an even up call. The thing is, you shouldn't have to make such huge even up calls like that, because that just blurs the lines across the entire league going forward, and it just ultimately hurts the product that we are trying to enjoy. We see these things all the time as viewers, and I think publicly talking about them, again, can improve that product going forward. Like the refs should be held accountable to these terrible calls that they make, as well as the league being held accountable. Now, I think the biggest thing that is so confusing as a fan of hockey, as a fan especially of playoff hockey, is the lack of acknowledgement from the NHL itself. When there's a play being called and they go to Toronto with all the cameras and they go to Toronto and talk about it and break it down, you can see they have 15 different angles. Everything's slowed down perfectly. Another thing, when you slow things down and you don't see it in real time, I think it's really skews what you're actually going to make a decision on, because seeing it in real time and slowing it down are just two different views, right? So even Danton Heinen tapping skates in real time, it was likely a penalty. But when you slow it down and you see them tapping skates, it's so much more dramatic, and it's just not a realistic view of the angle. And they still missed it, which is crazy, and it just makes it more clear that it was an even up call. Again, I'm a Boston fan. We know that was an even up call. We're not stupid. We can see it. So I just think the lack of acknowledgement from Gary Bettman, the head office of the NHL, whatever you want to call it, all these top dogs, they say nothing. Right? Like Sam Bennett punched Marchand in the face. It was a dirty play. Sure, Marchand deserved it. Okay. But why isn't the league just saying something about it? They don't acknowledge it at all. It's just so weird to me. Like, what sport are we watching here? It's just crazy that Bettman has said absolutely nothing about it. The final thing I kind of want to touch on, it's the ability of the Bruins to basically let go of the punch to the head of Marchand, take out their best player for 2 games at least, potentially 3 games if he misses game 6, and take the high road, right? Bennett punches Marchand, clear as day, and there's obviously conversations behind the scenes. We have Pat Maroon. He could go and clothesline Sam Bennett, take him out of the game, injure him, and then we lose Maroon, and really, there's not a huge loss there. If you take out Bennett, you take out Maroon. The problem with that, though, is you don't gain anything on the ice. And I think Marchand probably had a conversation with him. This is just based off what I've heard through interviews. It sounds like he had a conversation and like, we need to win hockey games. And if you're going to go take out Bennett or retaliate in every which way, that ultimately doesn't help us win the hockey game. This is not the time to do it. And just knowing that just shows a huge maturity in the captaincy that Marchand has, because in the past, you know how that would have been handled. In the Chara days, in the Lucic days, this situation would have been handled totally differently, but Boston knows that they have to beat a better team right now, and that does not help them if they handle it that way. All right, we'll see what happens in Game 6. My prediction is Boston is going to figure it out. Boston is finally going to play a complete game on home ice. They haven't really done that in the playoffs. We've seen just little tidbits of it, but a full, complete effort in Game 6. I think that's what we're going to see from Boston. They're going to push it to 7. It's a complete coin flip at that point. We all know that's how it works in Game 7s. And Boston can get this done, but against a team in the Florida Panthers that's just simply better in most ways, it's going to be a challenge. But I predict Boston comes out of this series and plays either the Rangers or the Canes in the next round. We'll see what happens. That's my prediction, of course. Super biased. We'll talk to you after Game 6.